Hi, Ingo. Welcome to Drag and Drop.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure, Feroz, being with you here today.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I've followed you for the last few years, and it's great to finally get some time to speak to you and learn a bit about yourself and your views on how things are currently going in the world of technology.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring these kind of discussions with you. So you are very much into the world of technology and low code, so I'm very excited.
Before we dive in, for those who don't know anything about you, it'd be good with a little brief introduction and background to yourself.
I'm born in Germany, working in Sweden, living in Sweden for more than 20 years, and have been an executive in technology in companies such as Ericsson, Adidas, and with a very large retailer here in the Nordics. I just spent the last couple of years in a company called Green Cargo, running cargo trains from the Nordics into Central Europe, and love technology. Have started my career as an author and have left the last position I had in December 25.
Yeah, I obviously, you've been made aware to me with your time from Great Cargo and working with low code there, and I'm interested to know, when you look back at, Green Cargo, which hard constraint, shaped your thinking the most, right? Was it legacy, regulation, culture, speed, and why did that constraint matter structurally rather than more tactically?
It's a good question because when I started Green Cargo, one of the key challenges we've had was to work with a very complex legacy. So it was a regulated business and it was also about speed because the company did not do so much. But, I think when I look at the important things that we were focusing on these days was to shape a scalable infrastructure. And that was quite important because it was really the core to the business change that would help us and allow us to create immediate business value while moving on. It takes a while to get the infrastructure in place, but we could use the business problems, the investments we made to always build new elements of the infrastructure and to continuously invest in and expanding it. And I think that was our approach to build a very composable operational capability from the core of our business, and that made innovation possible at scale.
Yeah, interesting. And you did not just modernize systems, right? You replatformed core capabilities to the cloud using low code, in the OutSystems platform. You know, what limits did traditional modernization approaches, hit that low code was able to really overcome for you?
Yeah, I think our systems help us very much to solve business problems in an incremental way, to better understand the business and to help the business to understand their problems better. That was also leading to um, uh, our ability to scale and orchestrate and reuse and rebuild things. Because once you've defined your demands on the technology and the application, you learn and your requirements are changing. So our systems allowed us to follow that path, to continuously adapt, adjust, and change, to split applications into two, to merge three into one. So this was kind of the dynamics that we've created on the OutSystems infrastructure to make sure that it would really help us to be with the business wherever the business was and to help them and guide them and give them opportunities rather than constraints and make decisions easy and fast to implement rather than finding another SaaS application that you would just have to add to your complex scenario of other SaaS services.
Yeah. And prior to Green Cargo and had you heard of, as a CIO, what was your views on low code and even out systems? What was your first impression? Because a lot of people I speak to, these days there's a lot more awareness around it that people know it. If I go back to 2018 when I entered the space, I think low code, the term was very still new, right? And people didn't really know, and they're very skeptical, right? They're very skeptical about low code, what it can do. What was your view and reaction to actually seeing the platform?
I think first of all, when I joined Green Cargo, it was for me, it was 1 year later, 2019, that I actually started talking to my team first time ever about low code in from a business point of view. My understanding was that I don't want another system that helps me to write code. I want a platform to scale And I want a platform that would help me to build the resilience into the application development process that I've never seen before. So I said to our systems when we were negotiating on the contract, I don't want any limitations with the platform. I want to scale. So when we use it, we really want to make sure we do it right from the beginning and set the principles into place and make it working within the infrastructure that we were actually planning to build. And so we did some changes and modifications to the setup of the platform, different to what our system was recommending these days. And
Yeah.
I think it was good that we did this. And we've got positive feedback over the years that this was the right move.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, what's good with these platforms, is it's a collaborative approach, right? Even though they've got their ways of working, you can make suggestions of your ways of doing things. And it's like you said, it's always great that at the end you appreciate that you're glad you took your views and followed it and it actually worked out and didn't come crashing down.
It worked out very much. I think flexibility, scalability, interoperability, exchangeability, and the resilience I talked about really edge capabilities that we could use and build on gave us the strength to also attract other programmers who love to work in the OutSystems environment, and they really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. And many organizations claim to be, modernizing, but end up recreating the same complexity in the cloud. What did you intentionally refuse to carry forward? And even with that decision, what created discomfort?
I think I was very lucky that I was surrounded by very clever, smart people, and they came with a very good um, proposals. So we discussed the principles at first, what is it that we want to build in terms of the entire infrastructure and where do we want to be? So we defined the core principles, and based on those principles, we put in the different platforms, the integration platform, the automation platform, the low-code OutSystems platform, the data analytics platforms. So we looked at these platforms as a total, but applying the same principles. So with these principles, we've defined the architecture and the process to use those platforms, meaning that they were giving us the opportunity to build control rather than losing control. So it was a kind of easy move, but it was discipline and execution and the decisions when the design questions came up. Do you want to use a platform as a service uh, to including the integration services, or do we stick to our Microsoft integration platform?
Oh,
And we were very clear on that. Never ever would we use a vendor's integration platform. So
yeah.
but these services were eliminated right from the start, and we knew that all of these decisions would lead to an environment that we could control, that we could grow, and that we could actually use in terms of scalability, usability, and all of these principles we have in place.
And how did low code change the power dynamics between IT and business leadership and your delivery teams? Where did that shift create real tension?
I think after the first pilot, where we realized we can build applications that the business could not buy anywhere else, so the business learned that definition of the problem wasn't really complete, and they learned through the process of discussing how shall we solve that with our systems that the problem was actually very different from the initial idea. And our system supporting that kind of development, so to doing changes and use that learning to improve the application as you speak. So I think that was for the business was new. It was not a decision about now we buy a software and then it works or it will not work. It was about, okay, let's have the discipline to be as good as we can in the requirements we have to define, and then to build on those requirements and really make sure that we could continue solving new problems and helping the business to improve.
And green cargo operates in a regulated, mission critical environment. So what technical and cultural conditions had to exist before OutSystems was trusted, with your core systems?
Our core system says, let me, if I start again, the regulation was really forcing discipline in execution. When you have that kind of responsibility running a train, there's a lot of safety involved. So you really want to make sure that you recognize and understand and build in those regulations into all the processes, the applications, and the way you manage your business. And I think we never ever experienced a situation where we could not do this. It was the opposite. It was was helping us to make sure that we were following uh, those regulations, and they were motivating us rather than stopping us from doing things. And you really that's the thing when you run trains and you know we do it in a safe way because that's your duty. People are really satisfied when they can trust the teams helping them to develop these capabilities. And we had great developers, and they were always in a very intensive dialogue. So just positive.
And when you look at, organizations, that are starting their, their low code journey today, what structural mistakes do they consistently underestimate, do you think?
I think that you should not see low code as an isolated capability. It's one of many platforms. In my first book, I called it enterprise platform engineering. So you hear a lot about platform engineering, then you do the engineering on the platform, but you need to consider the infrastructure with many platforms, and they're all in the cloud for most companies. But you need to make sure you design them as a whole. So you cannot just, look at one platform and build it and optimize the platform. You need to optimize the ecosystem of platforms. So this is a very strong advice. The second advice is that you need to create clarity on the principles that you need to apply for the design. And you need to be very strict in how you apply these principles. And they need to be the guidance for everyone in your team to know what decisions are the best ones for the ecosystem and for delivering value for the business. And I think so these two things, you can add a lot of other arguments, but I think keep it simple. Just, the ecosystem infrastructure. So it's not one platform, it's many, and they all need to work together. Then as you have your principles very clearly defined, so you know how to make decisions consistently moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on developers and obviously being in, Sweden, developer shortage is an issue everywhere. And obviously there's also a conversation around convincing traditional developers to work with a low code platform as well. As an organization, how did you deal with that? Did you come up with any pushback?
Yeah, when I started the journey with Green Cargo, we had no own development. So
Okay.
we created new DevOps teams, and we were heavily engaging with the market to attract very talented people. And I think we got a very good balance of young and experienced developers. The experienced developers helped us very much in the structural work, and they were more focusing on building applications logic that was giving us the decoupled services that we were actually focusing on. So everything was decoupled in our infrastructure, and I think they found a new focus in their development to support decoupled infrastructure. And when you build it, you see the impact again from the ecosystem point of view. You do not just look at a single application and how good is my code. You look at how good is my code in terms of the ecosystem. And that means that they started to really enjoy working with our system, not seeing our system as a problem. Even very experienced developers said it's changing the discussion, it's changing the discussion with the business, but also internally within IT. When you have that kind of advantage, things go much smoother. It's more fun for a developer as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And obviously as a CIO, I can only imagine how many conversations you've had involving AI in the last few years, right? Around AI and I can imagine that's been something kind of constantly, in your mind and in your conversations and thinking about, its business impact and, its organizational power shifts, right? You argue that, AI is not just accelerating decisions, but quietly reshaping power and autonomy, right? So where do you already see that shift happening without organizations explicitly acknowledging that?
I think we're discussing low code today, and now we're moving into vibe coding,
Yeah.
and these two things actually come together. Surprise, surprise. Most people would not see that and would argue that this is the end of low code because now comes vibe coding. And I think that we need to look at this problem differently. So when we started engaging with AI in terms of business problems and solving business problems, I'm not representing Green Cargo in this discussion. I'm now
Yeah.
taking it a little bit more general, right? Because I'm not
Yes.
working with the company anymore.
Yeah.
But the idea behind AI in that kind of business was to build from the core, to use AI from the core, not prompting, not, giving everyone a tool. Not everyone should build an agent or agents. So the idea was to build an environment very different from what most people actually take as an AI strategy. And I think that you can see that there is a risk explicitly with using AI for developers, and that's losing control, and that's losing the decision authority and losing understanding about what's being coded. So you need to be very clear on, is this a regulated part of your business? I'm running a train. Is that having a potential impact on safety? Or you might not want to use vibe coding and have a recursive self-improvement system that is changing the code and then ignoring the rules. So
Yeah.
that could be very bad. I think it's the same with any production capability or any other regulated system. So you really want to be sure that you understand your own code, that you can govern it. So
Yeah.
not giving the authority to the system. And I think
Yeah.
here's where our systems can help, because for the first time now in Vibe Code, I think that our system was actually announcing a lot of these kind of innovations now to come,
Yeah.
and creating the ability with a platform that helps you to understand the code while you're not coding it on your own. So the machine is doing the coding for you, and you are supporting the process, you are managing it. So I'm very positive about that development.
Yeah, I think they're definitely, obviously they had an announcement yesterday, and they're definitely kind of adding as much as they can to make it, a leading platform, right? And making sure, enterprises trust it, and, with enterprises that talking about governance, right? That's a big thing that's invested into, they're investing heavily in AI governance, What is it, what is different about AI governance in businesses, and how do you consider current attempts to add enterprise AI governance? And are they structurally, outpaced? And which assumption behind modern governance models has already broken in your views?
Yeah, I think I should not comment so much on the data protection officer issues or the CISO issues, but I think
Yeah.
more from a business perspective. So
Yes.
the governance from a business perspective requires that you are in charge of your environment. You don't want to be in an environment where you are running software that you don't understand, that you haven't chosen. That software is created by an autonomous system. And if you are there and the system is continuously adjusting, you don't know when the next change is coming and how this change will impact the outcome, and therefore increasing the risk, while you cannot mitigate it because you don't even know that's going to happen. So this unpredictability is something that everyone needs to understand. I think it's the business complexity where you need to decide whether you allow vibe coding wild and crazy, and where you do not allow vibe coding wild and crazy. And I think in both cases you can use our systems to have better control, and that's how you would govern the process when it comes to using AI at that level.
Yeah. And many leaders still say, human remains in the loop, right? In environments with agentic systems, do you think that's actually true? Or does that phrase mainly, preserve a sense of control?
After writing my third book, we're going to talk about that one.
Yes.
I would say, in terms of the algorithmic speed and the coldness of systems, and I think machine speed in general, we are at a point where humans are not in the loop anymore, but we pretend to are. So I think that, we think we have control, but we are seeing a shift of decision authority from humans to systems. And the less we know and understand about the systems, but the system starts to get into execution, the less we are in charge. It's difficult to say where we are at this point of time, but in business, in most organizations, we do not see so much progress about AI. So for business, most people can relax. They can have another 100 days without being in a, let's say, a very risky situation, maybe another 200 or 300, depending on. But in other cases, you see that AI is progressing very, very fast, very rapidly. I think we've seen it not in corporate, but in military defense systems advancing very, very rapidly. And there you see that the system would probably rather go beyond human decision authority and making decisions on its own. I'm not commenting on whether these are good or bad decisions. But
Yeah.
it's like I think we are living in both worlds simultaneously. But most enterprises have not succeeded to implement AI in a way that they would be in danger because they are so late. But
Yeah.
they need to be careful when they do agentic sub, like they control it right up from the beginning, because this
Yeah.
system could decide about your customers. They
Yeah.
could decide about your revenues. You don't want to do that. You don't want a system is doing that.
Yeah. As AI agents, begin making decisions across workflows and operations, where does that accountability realistically land when outcomes go wrong?
At the end of the day, it's always the CEO. The problem is the CEO does not understand. Then you can argue, of course, it's also with the executive team, and you can
Mm.
also argue here that the executive team all, most of the time doesn't understand. So who at the end should be in charge? And I think that we need to understand that most enterprises do not know what kind of questions they need to ask to make the right decisions, and they don't know whom to ask. So I think that they are trying to sort out things, and people are more and more into specific questions, and we're all building up knowledge as we speak, but we are always behind the development. So it's very difficult to find someone who can really give you the truth. So most decisions are being made without having a very good understanding about the consequences and the risk. I'm not against AI. I'm very much positive about AI. I think it's one of the most exciting inventions, if not the most exciting invention humans ever made. But we are about to lose control about its impact.
And, most organizations, they stop at co-pilots, chatbots, or, embedded AI features, why is that response, already insufficient from a, systematic perspective?
I think that if you build AI for an enterprise, you have to have different capabilities. It's the semantic capabilities, and so understanding how to use your data. Like semantic capabilities, so graph databases are used in social media systems to understand the patterns and the relations between objects. It's also about using agentic capabilities. So it's many now starting to build agents in combination with generative AI. So you have to build these, bring these together, and build from the core of your business. With other words, in my last job, we built a pilot to demonstrate with these three capabilities, semantic, agentic, and generative, to build a digital twin of the company's core business model, including all of its operational data, all of the structural data, the wagons, the trains, the infrastructure, the customer orders, the customer contracts, and everything that we had to use to run our business. And then from there, build the core processes with AI and help the business to understand, how to make better decisions, how to automate decisions, and so on. So I left before the project was fully implemented,
Yeah.
but I think this is the way to look at AI differently. So from the core of your business, look at it as a composable part of the infrastructure and the platforms you build, and then these things come together. So you don't do AI, you need to have the infrastructure for AI. Then you can build those capabilities.
And what's the earliest, operational signal that an organization has crossed the line, where, machine optimized decision authority outpaces human oversight?
You're becoming dependent of a technology that you don't understand and that you can't control, and that is the technology is making decisions beyond your horizon, and you deal with the consequences without being able to understand what has caused the problem. So I think that is where we see that the authority of our human oversight is smoothly disappearing. And the funny thing is that, and that's also something that I've worked with in my third book, the decision authority is not disappearing, it's shifting.
Yeah.
It's like in many physical systems, energy doesn't disappear, it just changes. And it's the same with decision authority. It does not disappear, but it suddenly ends up with the system. I think your question is very important for the future in AI projects. How do we prevent this to happen? If we can accept that, being a very clear understanding where you can accept it and where you can't.
Yeah. And talking about, you've just released your third book, A Billion Times Smarter, and firstly, thank you for sending me my copy. I appreciate that. You know, uh, and before we kind of, talk a bit more about it, I'd love to understand your, decision process around why this book, and what was the reason behind that?
The reason was um, I was trying to solve a very humanistic problem, um, which is a very personal problem in my family, by explaining how to use AI to overcome severe disabilities for people with major, let's say, I don't want to say problems, but a situation
Yeah,
which is very difficult to
yeah,
handle. And I understood during a period of 23 years that there are no technologies, there is no AI, and it's very fragmented how we look at assisted technologies. So I wrote a book to learn how to write. The first book was very much about corporate enterprise and how to use technology and build the infrastructure that we talked about, including low code. The second book was to describe how to empower humans with AI technologies. And the third book grew out of my learnings from the second book, that we are about to lose control and that we are moving towards a future where we have not understood the implication of the change to come, without talking about Armageddon, but trying to analyze and explain what's going on and where we are from a humanity point of view, and how that change is affecting our future and what we can do about it.
yeah. And, yeah, talking about the the humanity side, and it's framed around, like you said, AI as a exponentially evolving ecosystem rather than a tool, right? And can what is that shift, and how should people think about progress, power, and responsibility?
Let us take all three one by one.
Yeah,
So I think very easy progress. We will see an exponential development, and things will happen at machine speed. So we will not be able to cope up with the performance of algorithms working with data and knowledge. So I think it's an exponential change. Power will shift. I believe very strongly that what we just discussed, there was the decision authority will be taken over by the algorithmic logic. And the more this shifts, the more the power will shift. And you ask, the third one was responsibility, right?
yes,
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yes. And I think that we probably do not discuss responsibility, but we talk about human agency. So that where's the border for human agency? Um, and what's our responsibility in that particular question to make sure that we do not lose control? And that personally, in terms of the change that we are experiencing right now, we are using this technology with linear thinking and systems that are built to support and to fix linear problems. And like law, and so when you look at current laws and when you look at current
Yeah,
regulation, governance, they are all of these capabilities are designed for linear problems in a linear world. Now there comes the technology that is exponential, but we have no ways for policymakers to understand how they should make better decisions in a reality where everything is becoming exponential. And then there is a very typical example that can, just highlight the problem. We're talking about kill switch
mm,
capabilities, and we listen to some of the great people from those companies building these
yeah,
major AI capabilities. And then they talk about kill switch. But I wanna highlight that if we are into a infrastructure where the intelligence is not one large language model, which is a monolithic thinking, maybe existing of very many large language models, all trained and specialized on specific tasks, and they're all collaborating with all of the agents around. And then the agents are using recursive self-improvement capabilities. So the system is leaving the data center, more or less. So where would you want to put the kill switch? How many kill switches do you need at the
yeah,
same time? How do you want to kill the system? So if we talk about progress, power, responsibility, the three things you asked for, I think that for me, this is like we're in a situation where we're trying to use a fridge to stop glaciers from smelting. You can't put a fridge on a glacier and
yeah,
hope that it will not smelt. It
yeah,
will not work. And it's like the same with a kill switch in an infrastructure that is autonomously operating outside your data center. We're not fully there, but we are very much
yeah,
on our way. So I think, progress, power, responsibility, three very important questions that you asked.
yeah.
But I don't think that we have our arms around it.
Yeah, yeah. And public discourse, often swings between fear and hype. Where do you see the most underestimated transformational opportunities of AI for human development?
It's a very good question, but the answer is so difficult because I think that once the decision authority is shifting, And once we see that a system is capable of irreversibly taking over power, this is where we underestimate the. We are in a convenience phase right now. So we're all enjoying AI. We're using AI. We're playing with AI. We create videos. I think you need AI in your business, and that's very substantial because it helps you to do better with your work. But we are in a convenience trap. We do not ask the critical questions, and we accept whatever we've been told. And if one tells you there's a 20% risk of human extinction, and then people are laughing if someone else says that, we know that, but until then, we want to do as much as we can and as fast as we can and have lots of fun. You would never say that in a boardroom.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I think we are a little bit out of balance how we look at the global risk of what we are doing, while we are all waiting for the next model and the next performance and the next improvement and whatever. It's hype and fear, but I think we should be more informed about the trajectory and the things ongoing. We're not.
Yeah, yeah. And at the same time, what is the existential risk? Receive, far less attention precisely because they emerge quietly rather than dramatically.
Yeah, I think when I was working with writing my book, I was a little bit shocked about the ongoing discussion, and I tried to understand what are the risks. So you hear lots of examples of an impact, but you hear very little about the risk as such. And there are two key findings. So I defined both opportunities and risk on a systemic and humanistic level. So you need to look at these things differently than just, saying coders will be out of job or accountants will be out of jobs. That's not what we're talking about. This is an impact. This is the consequence of something else. And when you look at and I call them transformational opportunities, and you have no governance, very many of the systemic opportunities turn into risk because you cannot govern the impact of the positive change. And when there comes an imbalance into a positive change, like inequality, so let's say 10 of 100,000 get the advantage, the other not. So the system will be out of balance. So a society might not appreciate that, and the political system will change. So you will have people being dependent on that technology while 10 will rule. So you can use very many examples that would actually turn very easily from being a great opportunity for humanity into a risk for humanity. And then we come to the existential risk. As we do not govern things right now, the current situation of the existential risk is that this is about the erosion of human agency, like on this level, right? The risks are very complex, cascading. They are about how technocratic dominance is actually growing, so that you see a shift of power from a system that was democratic into something else. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm just saying these are risks that are associated to the technology we're using. It's the destabilization of the global order. It's the let's say the autonomous warfare capabilities that we are seeing, the agency that moves to machines, or the abandonment of humanity at the end if everything goes wrong. But these risks are complex, and when we do not govern those risks, they have cascading effects, they are impacting each other, and we do not discuss the systemic implication of AI. We only discuss examples of the outcome. And that makes it much easier for people to accept, because you always realize, well, it's not me. And then you come back to convenience. It's not me. This example, fine, I'm
Yeah,
not a coder, so it's fine.
yeah.
And then the accountant says, yeah, fine, I'm not a bus driver, whatever. So the thing is that these examples make it easier for those who wants to move forward, while all the others are saying yes without knowing what they say yes to. And it's an unbalanced situation.
Yeah. And speaking about governance, in a billion times smarter, you propose a 5-layer global AI governance framework, So why does governance need to evolve across multiple layers rather than relying on just regulations alone?
I think what I learned from this governance model I described in my book, I just get into it in a second, is that we are not governing at all. So there's very little governance globally. And I try to understand what is it that we need and what are people talking about when we talk about governance. And here is the model that I'm suggesting, which is a discussion rather than a predefined capability that we all need to implement. But first of all, there's an alignment layer, that is the global layer. with the standards, the values, and everything else, and you just need to make sure that this layer can be easily adapted to countries or regions, so that everyone finds themselves within this alignment layer. The second one, that's the development layer. This is where we are developing the technologies, and we need to govern it different than what we do today. The governance today is within the enterprises of those companies developing the large language models and the agentic capabilities and so on. So we do not govern this. The third one is the implementation layer. This is where we implement AI on a regional level, could be a country level, that could be an enterprise. We do not govern this really. So we are now implementing things in Europe with the European AI Act, and that's a very strong regulation, but it's a linear approach to governance. It's the old way of doing governance with a linear models and tools on an exponential technology. So it will not work. So the European, we try to do something great in Europe, but I think at the end of the day, it will not work because it's a linear capability. The fourth level, this is the empowerment level, it's where you, where I, where our families are, where everyone is. And no one ever has talked about how we should use governance to protect individuals rather than, when you look at data security and these kind of things, limit integrity, how do we really protect ourselves in a world where everything is AI? It is not just deepfake. AI can change all of your history and can get access to all of your financial systems and whatever, So where are we ending up? So, and then the fifth level, that is the level which is a very operational level or a layer, and that is an operational AI system that goes across those four layers and just works autonomously. It operates on machine speed and creates a dynamic within the governance system that allows us to have an exponential answer to an exponential problem when we're doing governance. And I'm currently writing my next book, and that is just, only about the governance model because it's so important. And I think that it's a very humanistic issue. And my definition of governance is that it needs to come from the individual, and then it needs to grow out to the rest. Because if we do not protect ourselves, what else do we want to protect? Everything else is just, a layer we need, that we can buy a car, that we can buy a phone, or that we have a state that will give us the social protection or whatever we're looking for. So, but at the end of the day, it's all about us humans, and we have no governance on humanity. So this is my thinking, and it's changing. I'm not sure if this is going to be appreciated, but this is my way of looking at it, and I'm going to put my efforts into this to make it clear.
And why is your new book challenging the current understanding of AI? And where can we find it?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's just exclusively on Amazon. I think there's some retailers who probably buy it and sell it as well. But if you want to find it, you go to Amazon, you just type in my name, and then or you type in A Billion Times Smarter, and you will gonna find it there.
I think we'll definitely drop a link on
Yeah,
LinkedIn when we
and I can,
post this episode.
it's you have shown the book. I think I just
Yeah,
let it move with like a billion times smarter. So it would make me proud, and I would love to hear feedback in any way, and
that's
appreciate
amazing.
to learn. Yes,
And it's great to see that, obviously you're already thinking about the next one, right? And starting the next book and kind of, you've got that kind of bit of a theme going on. And it's great to, you've got your opinion and you're sharing it, and some will agree, some won't, but that's the kind of, the what's the word? The passion around it, that's what you're passionate about, and that's the main thing.
that's correct. And I think that disagreement is very important in a time where we don't know what the outcome will be, and we don't know when things will happen. But for sure, if the experts in that world tell us we are about to approaching AGI, artificial general intelligence, there is of course artificial superintelligence, and what comes next. And I can just say this about my book. I also address a third form of artificial intelligence beyond artificial superintelligence that describes what will happen next, as a theory, as a thought, as inspiration.
Yeah. And finally, as AI automation accelerates and AI twins begin acting, deciding, and optimizing on behalf of humans, what is the most dangerous illusion humanity still holds about control? And what happens if that illusion collapses too late?
It's a difficult question to put all of these thoughts together. And in my mind, I can't tell you how many thoughts are ongoing, but I think at the end of the day, it is our inability to maintain decision authority. So we talked about that before, and to carefully manage the shift of power from the masses to a few, including, I think, the irreversible shift of machine speed that will change it all with algorithmic processing and where AI is moving into an intelligent infrastructure. So we might see a shift of power that we can't control.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, sharing, a bit about your journey, what you've done in the past, obviously your book, appreciate you again sending me a copy, and I love all your insights and views. And, I think it'd be great to stay in touch and, keep talking. And, I'm interested to see what comes from you next. And I look forward to hopefully, connecting in person sometime if I'm in Europe or you're on this side of the pond and, keeping in touch for sure.
Would be lovely. Thank you so much. It was a
Thank you,
very
Ingo.
nice conversation.
It was. Thank you.